Good afternoon.
So ask me why Ella is greeting and shining her teeth like she just won the lottery. Don't worry. She'll let you know in a minute. But before she does, parents always say, "One is different." Herself, chuckling under her breath, like she just remembered something sweet or dangerous.
Please leave me to shine my bright future prisoner. Well, I'm not going to jam the one. We're going to sell my kidney.
She laughs at her own joke, shaking her head playfully. Ocean catches her attention. Oh, the neighbors peep through their windows.
I bet don't mind them. Today no be their story, eh? Don't worry, today no be their story, eh? Don't worry, today na love story.
A place where justice is served. Or at least, that's what they say. Some call it a correctional facility. That's what they say. Some call it a correctional facility. Others, a waiting list. Agodi is a minimum security prison, but don't be fooled. A waiting list. Agodi is a minimum security prison, but don't be fooled. A halfway point between freedom and fate. A short stay before they walk. It's the last breath of open air before they are sent to move slowly, and hope is a place of waiting, a place of judgment, a place of waiting, a place of judgment. And today,
a secured van rolled up, rumbling to a halt. The air was thick and sat a new batch of inmates, some convicted, others still awaiting trial, their fates hanging in the balance of ongoing court proceedings. Mr. Bisp, the processing.
Yes, that's me, dancing. If not that way, I just released my result and said I have to pass. I'm only 6 fail. Me that want to be a nurse. Nurse not go work or na go last. Eh? One fair more. What would it be? They will arrest Jessie baby today. Just now.
A bit. The barrack personnel lived in the sandy open spaces, shade of trees, sharing gossip and laughter.
Major Martins froze for a moment. Then, shaking his head, he walked toward the door. Perhaps a neighbor? Another officer checked outside. There was no one there. Nothing but the cold night air and the distant hum of it. But Miriam, she knew something was wrong. A week later, Obinna was in his room when he heard footsteps pacing outside his door. He opened it. Nothing. Then a chilling whisper.
"Leave this place, or you will suffer the same fate."
Obinna froze. The voice was coming from the empty corridor. He ran to his mother, gasping. Miriam, now terrified, demanded they leave, but the major refused.
"I will not let fear drive me from my house."
Determined to uncover the mystery, Miriam visited Mama Titi, an elderly woman who had lived in the barracks for over 40 years. Mama Titi shook her head.
Raid, but his wife, she never left the house. They say she went mad, and when she died, her soul stayed, still searching for her husband.
We had seen an old military coat in the bins. That night, Major Martins finally believed. As he sat reading, the shadow of a man crossed his room. He grabbed his pistol and ran outside, but all he found were muddy footprints leading to the back of the house. Footprints that stopped suddenly, as if Suddenly, Obinna screamed from him. Miriam rushed in. They found him levitating, an invisible force holding him in the air. His eyes rolled back, his voice distorted. Miriam's trembling hands gripped Obinna's dangling leg, whispered prayers under her breath.
Major Martins, his heart pounding in his chest, stood his son captive. Then, as if in response to Miriam's cries, A sudden gust of wind whooshed through the room, extinguishing the bedside lamp. A deep, eerie silence followed. Obina dropped to the ground, gasping for air. His body twitched as his wide, terrified eyes darted across the room, rocking him gently as she sobbed. Major Martin swallowed hard, his voice hoarse.
Obina, son, are you all right?
Obina barely nodded, his breath ragged. He clung to his mother, his small body shivering uncontrollably.
Miriam, still clutching her son, looked up at Major Martins. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her eyes swollen from unshed tears. Then, to his shock, she fell to her knees before him, gripping his shirt tightly.
Martins, please. I can't stay here. I can't do this anymore. It's only been 2 nights and I feel like I'm losing my mind. This house, it's cursed. We have to leave.
Major Martins clenched his jaw, his hands trembling at his sides. He was a soldier, trained to withstand fear, to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. But this was something he couldn't fight. Miriam's voice dropped to a whisper as fresh tears streamed down her face.
There's something I didn't tell you.
I went to see Mama Titi.
Major Martins took a slow step back, his expression unreadable. Mama Titi? That old woman? Miriam? Miriam nodded, her grip tightening around Obina.
She knows things, Martins. She told me about this house and about Captain Idris.
Major Martins let out a slow, shaky breath. Tell me everything.
The year was 1969, a harrowing chapter in the Civil War, a conflict that tore through the fabric of the nation like a relentless storm. Captain Idris, a man of unwavering honor and unyielding duty, stood as a beacon of resilience amidst the chaos. He was not just a soldier, he was a husband, deeply and passionately in love with his wife, Amina. Their bond was a sanctuary, a fragile oasis in the desert of war. Idris had just returned from the front lines, a survivor of a brutal campaign that had decimated his battalion. Out of 1,124 able-bodied men, only 12 had staggered back, their spirits shattered, but their bodies intact. Idris was among them, his soul scarred, but his resolve unbroken. The military protocol dictated that he be granted a month of inactive duty,
or at least
a brief respite to heal and gather his strength.
Some call it a
But
correctional
fate,
facility.
cruel and
Others,
unrelenting,
that's what they say.
had other plans.
Some
His
call it a
commanding
correctional
officer,
facility.
a man
Others,
devoid of
a
empathy
waiting
and driven by cold
Agoni is a
pragmatism,
minimum security
callously
prison, but
added
don't be fooled.
Idris's name
A
to the
waiting-
roster of another
Agoni
imminent
is a
deployment.
minimum security prison, but don't be fooled.
Amina's world crumbled when she heard the news. Her
short
tears
stay
flowed like a
before they-
river,
a short
each
stay
drop a
before they
testament
walk.
to her despair.
It's the last
She
breath
pleaded
of
with
open
every
air before
officer,
they are sent
every
to move
bureaucrat,
slowly,
her
and
voice
hope is a place
trembling
of
with
waiting,
desperation.
a place of
She
judgment,
begged, she
a place of
implored,
waiting,
she
a
even
place of
threatened,
judgment.
but her cries fell on deaf ears. The machinery of war, her anguish.
Was thick with dust. The afternoon sun
Idris,
casting long
ever the
shadows
stoic,
across the
tried to
concrete
comfort
yard.
her. He held her
Inside the
hands,
van sat
his
a
touch
new
a
batch
fragile,
Mr.
stay
Bishop
safe,
and
gripping his
Stern
uniform as if her love alone
At this
could anchor him to
names
safety.
no longer-
Alone
At this
could anchor him to
names
safety.
no longer mattered.
Her eyes,
Each man
pools
was-
of unspoken fear, searched his face for reassurance.
Promise me, Idris. Promise me you will come back.
The moment was shot commands of a sergeant. The air grew heavy with the weight of Idris turned away. His silhouette turned away. His silhouette a fleeting shadow against the backdrop. He marched into the abyss, his figure swallowed by the oppressive fog of battle.
Close-knit community
He never
where
returned.
families of warders.
The days that followed were a blur of anguish for Amina.
Women gathered under
Hurting
uniforms.
symphony of grief. Amina.
Women gathered under
Hurting
uniforms.
symphony of
moved
grief.
about with purpose.
She clutched a pillow to her chest, rocking back and
Major
forth
Martins
as if
froze
the
from
motion in
toward
her
the door.
heart. Days
Perhaps
turned
the
into
neighbor
weeks in
toward
her
the door.
heart. Days turned into weeks. Weeks once
was
filled
no
with
one- there was no one
with
there.
the warmth of their
Nothing
love
but the cold night
grew
air.
cold and
There.
the warmth of their
Nothing
love
but the cold night
grew
air.
cold and silent.
And the distant hum of
Amina
Barrett's life.
refused to accept
He
the
frowned,
finality
stepping
of his
back inside,
absence.
locking the door
She
behind
sat
him.
by the door, her
Something
eyes
was wrong.
sat by the door, her
Something
eyes
was
fixed
wrong.
on the horizon.
When he heard footsteps pacing
For
outside
Amina,
his door.
time
He
stood
opened it.
still.
Nothing.
Each
Then
moment a
chilling
cruel
whisper.
reminder of the life she had lost. Her heart, once a beacon of love, now beat the rhythm of a dirge, a mournful tribute to the man who had promised to return, but had vanished into the unforgiving maw of war.
I will not let fear drive
Neighbors
me from my
whispered
house.
that she had gone mad.
Determined to
They
uncover
claimed
the
her
mystery,
wails could be
Miriam
heard
visited
echoing
Mama
through the barracks
Titi,
at
an
night.
elderly woman who had lived
She
in
would
the
sit by
barracks
the
for over
window,
40 years.
staring into the darkness,
Mama Titi shook her
waiting
head.
for a shadow that never came. Then, one cold night, she was found lifeless in her rock. One cold night, she was found lifeless in her rocking chair, still clutching a letter from her husband that had never reached her. Back in the present, Miriam's hands trembled as she wiped her tears.
Still searching.
She never moved on Martin's. Her soul.
We had seen an
It
old
never
military
left
coat
blocks
in.
on Martin's. Her soul.
We had seen an
It
old
never
military
left block
coat in
7. She's still 7. She's still
That night,
searching for.
His body
He
was
grabbed his
never
pistol
found,
and ran outside, but all he found
Miriam
were
hesitates.
muddy footprints leading
She's
to the
waiting
back
for
of
us
the
to bring him
house.
home.
Footprints that stopped
Find
suddenly.
him! Bring him home! Yes, Mom!
Suddenly,
Dad,
Obina
find him and bring him to
screamed
her!
from Miriam rushed in. They found him levitating in the air. His eyes rolled back. Miriam's trembling hands
That
gripped
night,
Obina's dangling
the barracks
list
was
with prayers
anything but
under her
silent.
breath.
Major
Doors
Martin,
slammed on
his
their
heart
own.
pounding in his chest,
Furniture
stood his
scraped
son
against the
captive.
floor.
Then,
Whispers
as if in
turned
response
into
to Miriam's
screams.
cries,
Major
a sudden
Martins
gust of
finally
wind whooshed
understood.
through the room,
This was no
extinguishing the
ordinary
bedside
haunting.
lamp.
This
A
was a
deep,
woman's
eerie
pain,
silence followed.
echoing through time,
Obina dropped to the ground,
demanding closure.
gasping for air.
And if
His
they
body
didn't find
twitched as
Idris,
his wide, terrified
they would
eyes
never
darted
be
across
free.
the room.
The following
Rocking him
morning,
gently as
Agony
she
Barracks
sobbed.
was unusually
Major
quiet.
Martin swallowed hard,
For the first
his
time in
voice
weeks,
hoarse.
there were no whispers, no phantom footsteps, no slamming doors.
Obina barely
The
nodded,
environment
his
felt
breath
hollow,
rag.
as
He
though
clung to his
something
mother,
or
his small
someone
body shivered
was waiting.
uncontrollably.
Major Martin
Miriam,
sat
still
at the
clutching
table,
her son,
his face
looked up
etched
at
with
Major
exhaustion.
Martin's. Her face
Miriam,
was pale with
her
exhaustion,
hands still trembling,
her eyes
held
swollen
onto
from
Obina,
unshed tears.
who had barely
Then, to
spoken
his
since
shock,
the night
she
before.
fell to her knees before
They
him,
had spent 3
gripping his
nights
shirt
in Block
tightly.
7, and it was clear
Martins,
this was no
please.
ordinary
I can't
haunting.
stay here. I
This
can't
was a
do
woman's
this
pain,
anymore. It's only been
echoing
2
through
nights,
time,
and I feel like I'm
demanding
losing my
closure.
mind. This
And if they
house,
didn't find
it's
Idris,
cursed. We have
they would
to
never be
leave.
free.
Major Martins
With the help
clenched
of a
his
few
jaw,
older
his hands
officers and
trembling
Mama
at his
Titi,
sides.
they
He
began
was a
their search
soldier,
for Captain
trained to
Idris's
withstand
final resting
fear,
place.
to remain steadfast
Mama
in the
Titi,
face of adversity.
lowering her voice.
But this,
His body was never
this was something
returned.
he couldn't fight.
But some say the soldiers
Miriam's
who died
voice
in the
dropped
war
to a
were
whisper
buried
as
together.
fresh-
Miriam, whispering, looking
There's
around
something
cautiously.
I didn't tell you.
Then
I
we
went to
need
see
to
Mama
find where they
Titi.
laid him.
Major Martins took a slow step back.
Major Martins,
his expression
Miriam, and Mama
unreadable.
Titi walked
Mama
deeper
Titi?
into the barracks,
That old
toward an
woman?
abandoned, overgrown field near the far
Miriam
end of the
nodded,
compound.
her grip tightening
Bushes
around
and
Obina.
vines tangled over the area, hiding what
knows
once
things,
stood there.
Martins.
After
She
nearly
told
an
me about
hour
this
of
house and
searching,
about Captain
they stumbled
Idris.
upon a rusted plaque, barely
Major
legible under
Martins
layers
let
of
out a slow,
grime.
shaky
It
breath.
read, "Here
Tell me
lie the
everything."
forgotten." Miriam's breath hitched. Her fingers traced the
The
corroded
year
metal
was
as a shiver ran through her
1969,
spine.
A harrowing chapter of
Miriam,
the Civil War.
softly,
A conflict
voice
that tore
trembling.
through the fabric of the nation.
This is it.
Like a
This is where he
relentless
is.
storm.
Captain
Captain
Idris.
Idris, a man of
They returned to
unwavering
Captain
honor
Idris's
and
home and
unyielding
buried him
duty,
near his wife,
stood
Amina.
as a beacon
This
of
is for the
resilience
forgotten,
amidst the chaos.
for the ones who
He was
waited,
not just a soldier,
and for the ones who
he was
never
a
came
husband,
home.
deeply
To
and
every
passionately
family
in love
who has
with his
lost
wife,
someone to
Amina.
war, to the
Their
battles
bond was
fought
a
beyond the
sanctuary,
fields,
a fragile
and to the
oasis
memories
in the
that
desert
refuse.
of
May their names never be
Idris had just
forgotten.
returned from the front
May their
lines,
stories live
a
on.
survivor of a brutal
May their
campaign
soul
that had
rest in
decimated his
peace.
battalion.
Amen.
Out of 1,124 able-bodied men, only 12 had staggered back, their spirits shattered, but their bodies intact. Idris was haunted, his soul scarred, but his resolve unbroken. The military protocol dictated that he be granted a month of inactive duty,
or at least
a brief respite
that's what they
to
say.
heal and gather his strength.
Some call it a
But fate,
correctional facility.
cruel and
Others,
unrelenting,
that's what they say.
had other plans.
Some
His
call it a
commanding
correctional
officer,
facility.
a man
Others,
devoid of empathy and driven by cold
Agodi
pragmatism,
is
Idris's name to the roster of another imminent
Agodi is a
deployment.
minimum security prison, but don't be fooled.
Amina's world crumbled when she heard the news. Her tears flowed like a river, each drop a testament to her despair.
It's the last
She
breath
pleaded
of
with
open
every
air before
officer,
they are sent
every
to move
bureaucrat,
slowly
her
and
voice
hope is a place
trembling
of
with
waiting,
desperation.
a place of
She
judgment,
begged, she
place of
implored,
waiting,
she even
a place of
threatened.
judgment.
But her cries fell on deaf ears. The machinery of war, her anguish.
Thick with dust. The afternoon sun
Idris,
casting long
ever the
shadows
stoic,
across the
tried to
concrete
comfort
yard.
her. He held her hands, his touch a fragile, stay safe. Amina clung to him, her fingers gripping his uniform as if her love, her eyes, pools of unspoken fear, searched his face for reassuring fear, searched his face for reassurance.
Promise me, Idris. Promise me you will come back.
The moment was Shaq commands of a sergeant. The air grew heavy with the weight of Idris turned away. His silhouette turned away. His silhouette a fleeting shadow against the backdrop. He marched into the abyss, his figure swallowed by the oppressive fog of battle.
Close-knit community
He never
where
returned.
families of warders.
The days that followed were a blur of anguish for Amina.
Women gathered up
Haunting symphony of Amina.
Women gathered up
Haunting symphony of grief.
about with
She clutched a pillow to her chest, rocking back and forth as if the motion of her heart. Days turned into weeks. Once
She laughs at her own.
cold and
As she walks further, a commotion
Amina
catches her
refused to
attention.
accept the finality
A warder is
of his
angrily
absence.
throwing his wife's belongings out of their flat,
Amina
shouting.
refused to accept
The
the
neighbors peep
finality
through their
of his
windows,
absence.
murmuring.
She's to accept the finality of his absence. She sat by the door, her eyes fixed on the horizon. For Amina, time stood still. Time stood still. Each moment a reminder of the life she had lost. A place where justice has served. Once a beacon of love. That's what they say. With the rhythm of a dirge. Some call it a correctional facility. The man others promised a waiting room where destinies hang in the balance. Agodi is a minimum security prison, but don't be fooled. It's also a transit hub, a halfway point between freedom and fame. For some, it's just a temporary stop, a place to wait until the courts decide their future, a short stay before they walk free. But for others, it's the last breath of open air before they are sent to maximum security, where time moves slowly and hope is a rare
clutching a letter from her husband.
A place of decisions, a place of waiting,
Back in the present,
a place of judgment.
Back in the present, Miriam's hands trembled as she wiped
A
her
new
tears.
story begins.
She never moved on Martins. Her soul.
She had seen an
A
old
secured van rolled up to the heavy gates, its engine rumbling to a halt. The air was thick with dust, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the concrete yard. Inside the van sat a new batch of inmates, some convicted, beginning their sentences, others still awaiting trial, their fates hanging in the balance of ongoing court proceedings. Mr. Ben, the officer on duty, stood at the entrance, arms crossed, watching with a seasoned gaze. A man of discipline and routine, he approached his task with the same diligence he had shown for years. His crisp khaki uniform bore the weight of experience, his demeanor stern but fair. This was his domain, and he ensured it was run by the book. As the inmates stepped out one by one, the processing began. No longer mattered. Each cold combination of their date of conviction and the rank of their offense. A system designed to strip away identity, series of digits and codes. Among the new arrivals was a young man, tall, quiet, with eyes that carried the weight of the world. His number was 2309. Unlike the others, he did not shuffle forward in fear or defiance. He stood apart, not in rebellion, but with a quiet dignity that caught the attention of even the most seasoned officers. Mr. Ben's gaze lingered on him for a moment before returning to the list in his hand. Just another prisoner, just another number. Little did anyone know, This was the day that would change everything. Not just for 2039, but for Gloria, Mr. Ben's daughter, who was about to walk into a story she never saw coming.
Gloria's father, at least according to him. Mr. Ben's journey to becoming a prison warder was anything but conventional. He was a struggling spare parts seller at Isopart when, one fateful day, a prisoner made a daring escape attempt near his shop. With surprising agility, Mr. Ben tackled the man, earning himself a reward, employment as a prison warder.
Lie, the man is very short. If not for the luck that he had that day, do you think he will get the job? Do you think he will get the job? He plan and save. Wait, though. Am I jealous?
Whether by fate or calculated move, the job changed Mr. Ben's life. He quickly climbed the ranks, married a warder's sister, and built a family. His daughter Gloria, and 2 younger sons. Life started looking up for him.
Gloria, Mr. Ben's daughter, was nothing short of extraordinary. Young woman, she stood out among her peers in the barracks, not just for her beauty, but for her intellect and unwavering determination. Unlike many of the other girls, Gloria carried herself with a quiet grace and poise, a reflection of her father's unyielding discipline and the high standards he set for his children. Mr. Ben was adamant about one thing: his children would not settle for less. At the time, Gloria was in her final year of law school, a step away from becoming the first lawyer in their family. But as fate would have it, a nationwide lecturers' strike had put a frustrating pause on her education, forcing her to stay home for rather than idling away, Gloria found purpose. She joined the Prison Evangelism Forum, a volunteer group dedicated to bringing hope and spiritual support to inmates. They visited the prison regularly, sharing the Word of God, offering encouragement, and even helping some prisoners secure legal aid for their cases. For Gloria, this wasn't just about faith, it was about justice. She believed that not every man behind bars was guilty, and that everyone deserved a chance to be heard. What she did not know, however, was that this decision, to walk through the prison gates as a beacon of hope, would change her life forever. Because among the inmates she would soon meet, one would rewrite the course of her story in ways she never imagined. It was Legal Aid Day at Agodi Prison, a day when new inmates willing to speak could come forward. The outreach team, including Gloria and other volunteers, sat behind a long wooden table, flipping through documents, taking notes, and listening carefully. One by one, prisoners stepped forward, sharing their stories, some hopeful, some desperate. Then, an inmate stepped forward, Inmate 2309. For a moment, he stood in line, waiting for his turn. But just before reaching the front, he hesitated. His fingers curled into fists, his head dipped slightly, and then he stepped out of the line. He turned and walked back toward his cell. Gloria noticed immediately. She stood up.
Hey, you, wait!
Gloria called him, but he kept walking, shoulders tense, footsteps heavy. Gloria quickened her pace, reaching him just as he stepped into the corridor leading back to the cells. Gloria, slightly breathless.
Why did you leave? You were next in line.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter. You were willing to...
My case is a murder case. No one will help me. No one will believe me. Gloria's heart sank. She wanted to, but before she could, he walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the cell block. 2309 didn't rush, nor did he hesitate. His steps were steady, deliberate, as if he had long made peace with his fate.
That night, Gloria could do anything but sleep. She tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the memory of his face, the weight in his voice, the finality in his words.
Why? Why would someone reject an opportunity that others would give anything for?
As Gloria lay awake, lost in thought, the door creaked open slightly. Her mother stepped inside, her tall frame silhouetted in the dim light. Gloria's mother said softly,
Gloria, are you still awake?
Gloria confided in her mother, sharing what little she knew and pleading with her not to tell her father. "I'll tell him myself when I need his help," she assured her. Her mother sighed, her voice firm. "Gloria, leave your father out of this. If that man isn't willing to speak, there's little the outreach can do. And you know your father doesn't support you joining the outreach. He only tolerates it because if he finds out you're this invested in one inmate's case..." She trailed off, shaking her head. The next morning, Gloria made a decision. If she wanted answers, she had to take a risk. Carrying a food flask, she made her way to her father's office at Agodi Prison. Inside his small, neatly arranged office, Mr. Ben was caught off guard when he saw his daughter walk in with a smile. He arched a brow but couldn't hide his slight amusement. Mr. Ben, surprised yet pleased, "Ah, my daughter, you came all the way here just to bring me food? What do you want?" Gloria chuckled lightly, setting the flask down on his desk. Gloria. Softly, hesitating. "Daddy, I met someone here yesterday. Can I have a word with him?" Her father's brows furrowed immediately. Mr. Ben, suspiciously, putting down his pen. "Who?" Gloria fumbled for a moment, pretending to struggle with remembering. Gloria, carefully choosing her words. "I can't recall his name, but he's new. His number, it ends with 09. Mr. Ben froze for a second. His expression darkened as he slowly exhaled, rubbing his chin. Then, almost in a whisper, he muttered, "Mr. Ben," low, wary tone. "A murderer." His eyes snapped back to Gloria. "Mr. Ben," firmly, voice rising slightly. "Gloria, what exactly are you doing here?" Gloria shifted nervously, knowing she was stepping into dangerous territory. Gloria, pleading but careful. "Daddy, I just want to check his file. That's all. He refused to talk to me, but I feel like there's more to his case." Before she could finish, Mr. Ben slammed his hand on the table.
"Gloria, no. Have you learned nothing from my stories? Do you know how many officers have ruined their careers because they got too involved? I almost lost my job twice trying to help an inmate. You think these prisoners don't know how to manipulate people? They study you. They make you feel sorry for them. Next thing you know, your name is in their mess."
"Go home. Now," Mr. Ben commanded, his voice sharp and final. Defeated, Gloria silently picked up the food flask, her fingers tightening around it as she turned toward the door. Her father's anger didn't surprise her, but what he failed to see was that his outburst had only fueled her determination. She needed answers, and if he wouldn't help her, she would find another way.
Gloria was a good girl, no doubt, taught you something valuable. When one door won't open, determined to get the information she needed, she reached out to junior warders. Young, easygoing, and known to handle a lot of administrative work, he was exactly the kind of person who could access prison records. If she played her cards right, he might just be her way in.
I have a loose 20,000 for the job.
Officer Cola, ever the opportunist, smirked, tilting his head. Cola. "Oh, or you could pay the other way, though." Gloria's expression turned cold in an instant. She fixed him with a sharp. Without another word, she shoved the 20,000 into his hand. "Gloria," said firmly, "deliver the letter and hand me what you can get. Nothing else." She turned away, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with determination. Cola watched her leave, rolling the cash between his fingers. He could push his luck. But something in Gloria's stance told him she wasn't one to be messed with.
Officer Cola had done his part. He over-delivered, because for a small price, he has been secretly dispatching letter and has even arranged a private meeting between herself, a legal representative Gloria arranged, and inmate 2309, Daniel. Inside a dimly lit interrogation room, Gloria and the lawyer sat on one side of a steel table, hands folded in front of her, steady and composed. The door creaked open, and Daniel walked in, escorted by a guard. He hesitated for a moment before sitting across from her. His movements were guarded, but his eyes, those deep, tired eyes, held years of pain and betrayal. Gloria wasted no time. Gloria, calmly but firmly.
I read your letters. We got some information from your case file, although some tampered with, Daniel. I know what they're saying about you, but I need to hear it from you. I need to know the truth.
Daniel leaned back, exhaling deeply. He stared at the table for a long moment, then rubbed his forehead as if debating whether he should say anything at all. Finally, he spoke.
You won't believe me either, no one does.
Try me, Daniel.
Since his arrest, Daniel found himself speaking freely. He told her about his uncle, the man who raised him after his parents died, sponsor and only known family, putting him through school and making sure he became a trained mechanical engineer. But there was a darker side to the story. His uncle wasn't just a guardian. He was a ruthless businessman and a rising government aspirant, a man who believed that power was taken, not given. One night, his uncle had an argument with his business partner, a man who threatened to expose some fraudulent dealings just before a big election. That same night, the man was shot dead. Daniel had no idea what had happened until the police stormed his apartment. A gun was found, hidden in his belongings. His uncle had framed him. Daniel, remember the way he looked at me when I was no guilt. He promised me he'd get me out, but it's been over a year. And now, Gloria's fingers tightened around her notes.
Your uncle lied to you, didn't he?
Of course he did. He made sure I took the fall so his hands would stay clean. I trusted him. I called him my father.
A heavy silence settled between them. Then, as the meeting ended and the guards prepared to escort him back, Daniel did something unexpected. He reached out, gently pulling Gloria's hand. For the first time since they met, he looked at her, not with suspicion, not with guarded fear, but with something softer.
Thank you.
Their eyes locked, and in that moment something shifted.
Nothing shifted in that interrogation room, at least not in the air. But something shifted in Gloria's heart. As Daniel's voice trailed off, Gloria sat still for a moment, her gaze locked on the man across from her. He didn't flinch, he didn't plead, he just told the truth. Gloria, whispering to herself, "No, my father was wrong." That night, Gloria couldn't sleep. She sat under her reading lamp, surrounded by court transcripts, surveilled case file. Parts of it smudged, redacted, and clearly tampered with. She began cross-referencing dates, phone calls, and signatures. She spoke to the outreach team she once volunteered with. She contacted a civil rights group and demanded they take up Daniel's case. Over the next few weeks, by Gloria's documents and sworn statements, a private investigator began tracing the financial records and call logs that led back to Daniel's uncle.
His eyes snapped back to Gloria.
The truth didn't ask for permission. It erupted, like floodwaters shattering a dam. It tore through every lie. Falsified witness reports, hidden forensic evidence, phone records tracing back to his own uncle. The courtroom held its breath as the lawyer's voice cut through the tension. And then those words Daniel had stopped dreaming of hearing. This court finds Daniel Okechukwu not guilty on all charges. Free. After 2 years of fluorescent lights and answering to 2309, freedom felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. His eyes couldn't even process the sky. And Gloria? She didn't cheer, didn't cry, just watched as the man she fought for learned how to breathe again. While one man walked into freedom, another walked into a cell. Daniel's uncle was arrested 2 days later. Embezzlement, witness tampering, conspiracy to frame. The headline screamed of justice finally served. The same prison that once held Daniel now held the man who betrayed him.
Anger didn't surprise her.
Meanwhile, Mr. Ben's suspension letter arrived like a thunderclap. Unauthorized access to classified prisoner files. Immediate suspension pending investigation. Gloria stood frozen in their living room as her father, always so proud, so disciplined, his voice shook with betrayal. Mr. Ben, you used my access after all my warnings? Gloria, you've ruined everything I've worked for. Gloria's mother wept silently in the corner. The twins, sensing the storm, had fled to their room. Gloria, whispering, I had to, Daddy. Daniel was innocent. If you choose prisoners over your own family, then go. That night, Gloria found herself on the streets with nothing but her phone and a backpack. With trembling hands, she called the only person who'd understand.
I have a loose 20,000.
Daniel answered on the first ring. Within an hour, he was there, wrapping her in his arms as she sobbed into his shirt. You shouldn't have risked so much for me, Gloria, lifting her head. It was worth it. For the first time in years, Daniel cried too. Weeks later, while sorting through his late father's documents, Daniel made a shocking discovery. His uncle's stolen wealth? It was never his. Deeds, bank records, a will, all proving the businesses, the houses, even the cars were rightfully his father's. His uncle had not only framed him for murder, but had stolen his inheritance. Daniel hired a fierce lawyer. Within months, courts overturned the fraud. The wealth was restored.
But something in Gloria's stance
One sunny afternoon, Daniel arrived at Mr. Ben's house in a sleek car, Gloria beside him. Her father answered the door, his face hardened, until Daniel knelt. Sir, I've come to ask for your forgiveness and your blessing. Daniel said he placed two things on the step, an engagement ring for Gloria, a deed for one of his father's steel companies, now under Mr. Ben's management. Mr. Ben, eyes wet. You trust me with this? After everything? Daniel, smiling. Family looks out for family. Gloria squeezed his hand as her father pulled them both into a crushing embrace. And so the man who was once prisoner 2309 didn't just win his freedom, he won a family. As for Gloria, she finally proved that sometimes the best love stories begin where others see endings.
We got some information from your case file, although some tampered with
that's
Daniel.
me, that's it.
I know
I don't
what
have
they're
a
saying
problem
about
with
you,
not that why
but
just
I need
release
to
my
hear it
result
from you.
and said I have
I need
to
to know the
pass.
truth.
I'm on this is fair.
Daniel leaned back,
Me that want to be a
exhaling
nurse.
deeply. He stared at the table for a
No, it's
long
not gonna
moment,
work, oh.
then rubbed
My
his
brother
forehead,
last
as if debating whether
Eh?
he should say anything at
Okay,
all.
Mom. Yeah?
Finally, he
Am I
spoke.
Mom?
You won't believe
What?
me either, no
What would
wonder.
be with it?
Try me, Daniel.
His arrest, Daniel found
Hey, wait,
himself speaking freely.
Don't be police
He
with
told
this.
her about his
Who is Jessica here? Who is Jessica here? Jessica?
They will arrest Jessie baby today.
Emanuela.
Who is Jessica here? Who is Jessica here? Jessica?
Emanuela.
Mechanical engineer.
How would I
There was a
continue
darker
this just
side to the
now?
story. His
Make a
uncle
hand
wasn't
over
just a
this.
guard.
Make a hand
He was a
over.
ruthless businessman.
Yes,
and a
so
rising
my name is
government aspirant.
Ella
A
Baby.
man who believed that power
Let me go
was
give you
taken,
this barrack
not
gist the
given.
way you want it. Just
One
listen.
night,
Let me
his
start
uncle
from
had
the
an argument with his
beginning.
business partner,
Beginning.
a man who threatened to
The gist
expose
is
some
sweet.
fraudulent claims just before a
Yes.
big election.
All of those
That same night,
leg.
the man was shot dead. Daniel had no idea what had happened until the police stormed his Let me break this barracks life down a bit. The barracks were a world of their own, a close-knit community where families of warders, policemen, and military by side. The buildings were modest, rows of bungalows stretching out in uniformity, with children running barefoot in the sandy open spaces between them. Women gathered under the shade of trees, sharing gossip and laughter, while men in uniforms moved about with purpose. Even despite the sense of order, the barracks had an undercurrent of chaos, shouting matches between neighbors, loud music blaring from transistor radios, and the occasional visit from superiors enforcing discipline. It was a place where people made do with little, finding joy in the small things. A game of football, a shared pot of stew, or the evening breeze after a long, hot day.
Let me gist you on how it all began.
In the early 1980s, before the era of social media and instant messaging, people found friendships across the world through pen pals, an old-school way of connecting with strangers by exchanging handwritten letters. Veronica, a young Polish woman, signed up for a pen pal program in hopes of making international friends. Little did she know, this would change her life forever. Among the many letters she received, one stood out. It was from a man named Prince from Nigeria. His words were poetic, filled with grand tales of his heritage, and he spoke of Africa with such mystique that Veronica couldn't help but be enchanted. She assumed, quite naturally, that he was a real prince. After all, his name was Prince, and his descriptions of his homeland painted a picture of royalty and grand letters, growing fonder of each other with every page. Veronica, dreaming of an adventurous love story, made the daring decision to leave Poland and traveled to Nigeria to be with her prince. When Veronica arrived in Nigeria, she expected a royal reception, perhaps drums, dancers, and a palace. Instead, she was greeted by a well-built man in a prison warder's uniform. Her prince was no royal. He was Mr. Prince, a 31-year-old prison warder who barely made enough money to sustain himself.
Where is your palace?
Veronica asked in disbelief. Prince chuckled nervously. You misunderstood, my love. I am Prince in name, not in title.
Veronica nearly fainted. She had left her country, family, and life behind for a man she believed out he was a humble civil servant.
You lied to me.
She screamed. I never said I was a king's son. You did not even ask. I just let you believe what you wanted and hoping you would like what you see.
Veronica was furious, but as she looked at the charming, broad-shouldered man standing before her, something strange happened. She fell in love all over again. Or maybe it was the intense Nigerian heat messing with her mind. Either way, it was too late to turn back. That very night, in the small one-bedroom flat Prince called home, she conceived their first and only child, Jessica. Jessica was born a few months later, a breathtakingly beautiful child with striking features, deep brown eyes, golden skin, and soft, curly hair. She was the perfect blend of Polish and Nigerian heritage, a head-turner wherever she went. Growing up in Agodi barracks, Jessica was both admired and envied. She was different, and that difference made her special. But it also made her a target. Kids would tease her, calling her Oyinbo, white person one day, and half-caste the next. But Jessica held her head high, knowing she was a rare beauty. On the other hand, Jessica's mom, Veronica, began to realize the harsh truth. She had given up everything for a man she thought had all the money in Africa, a man she believed would make her a queen. But now she saw things differently. There were days when Veronica regretted her choices. She would call Prince a wretched man and dream of going back to her old life. But going back wasn't easy. Her neighbors in the barracks were no help. One day, they would admire her love story, and the next, they would gossip about it like cats and dogs. But Veronica wasn't one to wallow in regret for long. She decided to take control of her life, inspired by how she had found love through letters, even if it was based on a misunderstanding. She came up with a plan. Veronica started a business. Her promise: to connect Nigerian men with foreign women for marriage. The deal was simple. Desperate Nigerian men, eager to marry foreign wives and secure visas, would pay her to link them with Oyinbo women. Veronica would spin elaborate stories about Polish, Russian, and American women who were desperate to marry African men. She told her clients these women needed money for visas, flight tickets, and upkeep. The men, blinded by the dream of an exotic European wife, handed over their hard-earned money. Veronica would take it, promise them love. It was a brilliant scam. The men kept coming, each one believing in the dream Veronica sold them. And Veronica? She lived comfortably, funded by their desperation. As Jessica grew older, she became part of her mother's business, albeit unknowingly. She often took pictures of supposed husbands-to-be as part of the matchmaking process. The men believed these photos would be sent to their future wives overseas, while Veronica pocketed their cash.
One sunny afternoon, Daniel arrived at Mr. Ben's house in a sleek car, Gloria beside him.
Hooray! Okay, yes, business is booming. Veronica's business began thriving beyond her expectations. She had excess money to spend, clubbing and making merry. But we all know that with wealth came pride, and soon she no longer saw a need for Prince. Oh, poor Prince. Prince's world was crumbling around him. Despite his desperate pleas, Veronica's heart remained resolute. She had already set the divorce proceedings in motion, and Prince's once stable life was now on shaky ground. At work, Prince struggled to concentrate, his mind consumed by the impending loss of his wife and the life they had built together. His performance suffered, and he teetered on the brink of losing his job as a prison officer. But Veronica remained unmoved, her determination to leave him unshakable. She said,
"When I'm done, I'll move out of this house,"
she said, her voice devoid of emotion.
"But until then, I'll operate my business from here."
Prince's eyes pleaded with her to reconsider, but Veronica's gaze remained cold, her resolve unbreakable. The man who had once been her everything now seemed insignificant, a relic of a love that had lost its way.
On the other hand,
Jessica, now growing into a young woman, inherited her mother's arrogance. With her beauty and newfound influence, she took a twisted pleasure in luring married men into affairs. It was no longer just about the money. It was about power.
One day, an interlude took place when a woman named Ella stormed into the marketplace yelling at Jessica.
"Because of your rubbish money and beauty, you took my boyfriend's Imagine. I know one day you and your mother will be exposed."
Jessica smirked, unfazed. Her mother had taught her well. Jessica replied,
"My name Jessie, baby. Please refer to me well."
Meanwhile, some of Veronica's clients had waited for months. Some have gone to the airport twice, expecting to welcome their foreign brides. But no one ever arrived. Veronica would always have an excuse.
The flights were canceled. They need more money for a new ticket and to book sleepovers in Dubai and Italy. Just a little more time and money, and I promise they'll be here. Your sweethearts will all be here, okay? I understand how you're feeling. They are also eager and can't wait.
Desperate and blinded by hope, the men would pay again and again. Veronica's deception ran deep. She crafted hundreds of fake letters, masquerading as messages from the women she claimed to have matched with her clients. With meticulous attention to detail, she varied her handwriting styles using different pens, concocting romantic tales and promises of eternal devotion. Her charade continued at the post office, where she would collect the letters, feigning excitement and anticipation. But unbeknownst to her, Ella's mother, a keen-eyed postal worker, had grown suspicious of Veronica's activities. She noticed a peculiar pattern. Veronica would open her postbox, drop in letters, wait a while, and then retrieve the same letters she had just deposited. One day, Ella's mother decided to investigate further. She watched as Veronica repeated her usual routine, and her suspicions were confirmed. The letters, supposedly from Veronica's European connections, were actually written by Veronica herself. The ruse was exposed, and Ella's mother now held the truth.
His words were poetic, filled with grand tales of his
Ella's mother gasped in disbelief. Her mind flashed back to the past, to a time when Prince was desperately searching for a wife. Ella's mother had introduced him to her own sister, Bimbo, a stunning woman with striking curves, confidence, and charm. But Prince had used Bimbo and sent her away without a second thought. Now, as she pieced together Veronica's elaborate scam,
She's chest stood frozen, his pistol useless against whatever unseen force held his son captive. Then, as if in response to Miriam's cries, a sudden gust of wind whooshed through the room, extinguishing the bedside lamp. A deep, eerie silence followed. Obina dropped to the ground, gasping for air. His body twitched as his wide, terrified eyes darted across the room. Miriam scooped him into her arms, rocking him gently as she sobbed. Major Martin swallowed hard, his voice hoarse.
Obina, son, are you all right? Obina barely nodded, his breath ragged. He clung to his mother, his small body shivering uncontrollably.
Miriam, still clutching her son, looked up at Major Martins. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her eyes swollen from unshed tears. Then, to his shock, she fell to her knees before him, gripping his shirt tightly.
Martins, please. I can't stay here. I can't do this anymore. It's only been 2 nights and I feel like I'm losing my mind. This house, it's cursed. We have to leave.
Major Martins clenched his jaw, his hands trembling at his sides. He was a soldier, trained to withstand fear, to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. But this was something he couldn't fight. Miriam's voice dropped to a whisper as fresh tears streamed down her face.
There's something I didn't tell you.
I went to see Mama Titi.
Major Martins took a slow step back, his expression unreadable. Mama Titi? That old woman? Miriam? You went to her without telling me? Miriam nodded, her grip tightening around Obina.
She knows things, Martins. She told me about this house and about Captain Idris.
Major Martins let out a slow, shaky breath. Tell me everything.
The year was 1969, a harrowing chapter in the Civil War, a conflict that tore through the fabric of the nation like a relentless storm. Captain Idris, a man of unwavering honor and unyielding duty, stood as a beacon of resilience amidst the chaos. He was not just a soldier. Out of 1,120, cruel and unrelenting, had other plans. Devoid of empathy and driven by cold pragmatism, callously added Idris's name to the...
Her tears flowed like a river, each drop a testament to her despair. She pleaded with every officer, every bureaucrat, her voice trembling with desperation. She begged, she implored, she even threatened, but her cries fell on deaf ears. The machinery of war was indifferent